Well, there you have it, folks. That is Rise of the Argonauts for PC. Thank you very much for following along with Underplayed. If you have been following along with the commentary, then you'll know that I have a very high view of this game. I'm really surprised that it hasn't received more notoriety. I think it's absolutely underrated. They have beautiful art direction, a really unique take on this Greek mythology setting. They kind of use it as a jumping off point. There's clever nods to mythology in it throughout, but they definitely use that as kind of a toolbox to create their own story, create their own story world. And it's a very engaging one as well. Speaking of the story has been one of the more engaging ones that we've played through UnderPlayed in a long time. I haven't enjoyed a story playthrough this much since we were doing a recording of Argonauts, and that's really saying something. So yeah, I thought it was really clever writing, great music, great art direction. I love the setting. I really I had to search to find things I didn't like about this game, because so much of what they did really was on the mark. I thought that it did lots of things uniquely too. I like the level up system. That was something that I hadn't seen in an RPG. I hadn't seen it handled that way, rather. I really like the way they did that. Again, going back to the story, I really like that even though we are playing, another white male protagonist, we're playing in a different way than we're used to. He's a family man, he's a husband, and he's trying to save his lost love. This is something we don't see very often. Usually, there's a love interest in the video game itself, right? Somebody that you fall in love with in your romance as you go through the game. That's probably the lack of a love interest is probably what contributed to this game's lack of popularity. Just because people like having a love interest in video games, and I'm not gonna decry that. But I enjoyed getting to get a different perspective here. Now, granted, Dante's Inferno, I think, obviously had the same mechanic, the same storytelling device, rather. But I really, really liked the implementation of Jason's romance with Alceme, and that being, kind of the guiding, the motivating event for the entire story. It was a very, especially in an RPG environment, it caused me to play the game differently. To think about, okay, well, how would I play this if if I was doing this to save my wife, instead of being just a free single guy. So I really like that aspect. And I like so many aspects of the story. In fact, I felt like there was strong female characters, which is something we don't see very much. There was quite a lot of sexualization in a lot of the character design, but I felt like it went both ways. I felt like the men and the females were both kind of embodiments of these Greek ideals of beauty, and I was very okay with that. And again, the fact that they all had such unique character designs and it was so imaginative really contributed to how much I enjoyed that. There were obviously a couple of areas where we were lacking the polish of something we might expect from a title by BioWare. The animations during the dialogues, they could be a little bit stiff. We did see quite a few reused models throughout, but these are all relatively minor complaints. These are just a consequence of having a smaller studio, a smaller budget to work with. And I think that these designers worked within those constraints very well, and they told a very effective story through this. It was very engaging. It didn't keep me guessing like a thriller or a mystery necessarily, but it did challenge and subvert a lot of my associations that I had, not about just the direction that the game was leading me in, but also coming from what I understood of Greek mythology already. I wouldn't recommend this as an accurate source for learning these legends, but as a jumping off point, using that as a setting and seeing what you can do with it, I think was a fantastic idea. And something that's really cool about games like this, when you're creating a game that's based in existing lore, is it hopefully inspires other people to go back and look up these legends and stories, and actually read these myths. I love seeing that. I love seeing games that pay homage to actual existing lore and inspire people to go and discover more on their own. that was one of the things I really enjoyed about Enslaved. You know, I had very little knowledge of the source material of Enslaved, but after playing that game, I was like, oh, I have to find out what this is based on, you know? And I have the same sensation playing Rise of the Argonauts. You know, I really want to go and look up the myth of the Golden Fleece and see what things they you know, adapted faithfully in the game versus what things they changed, you know? And the characterization was also another strong selling point of this game. You know, also the balance between storytelling, you know, our dialogue aspects, having our choices and quests and stuff, and actual combat was spot on. You know, we had relatively little combat compared to what we see in most video games. You know, if you had to break down a video game into story and combat, I think most games you're going to find about a 30 to 40%, or even a 20 to 40% amount of story versus a 60 to 80% combat or gameplay aspect. You know, here that ratio was much closer to 50-50, and if anything, it weighed in favor of the storytelling. And this is something that's very rare. We don't really see that very often. Not really since Planescape have we seen a game that that really emphasizes the storytelling so much to a higher degree than the basic gameplay elements, the basic fighting hordes of monsters. And the fighting was fun. The gameplay was fun. I really enjoyed the action combat. You know, but there's a certain degree where if you played one action combat game, you've kind of almost played them all, you know? So I appreciated the fact that they weren't really trying to impress us with the fighting. You know, they knew that, the developers knew that fighting hordes of Tartarus monsters was not going to be what distinguished this game. You know, they knew that it was going to be the storytelling, and I think they placed the emphasis accordingly. But overall, it's a very well-balanced game. It's a great story. It's got some amazing settings and environments and art and music, and I highly, highly recommend this to anyone. Unfortunately, it looks like they were indeed setting up for a sequel, you know, and the title is Rise of the Argonauts, so that already makes you think there's going to be more. And in addition to that, you know, we still haven't seen Hecate. You know, she's the big bad. She's, you know, the Reapers, if you will, to use a Mass Effect reference, you know. And I don't think this game got enough traction to really warrant that sequel. But, and I'm really sad to see that, you know. Unfortunately, that's usually the case with a lot of stuff that we play on Underplayed, since we are looking at lesser-known titles. It's very often that we find, you know, franchises in stillbirth, you know, planned franchises that just didn't get enough traction from their initial offering to warrant a sequel. And that's always sad, you know, especially when you see a game like this with a lot of promise. As I said, it had so many great fundamentals right, and it could have used a little bit more polish, and that's certainly something we would have seen in a sequel, I'm sure, you know. Now, fortunately, we're living in a new age of game development and, you know, indie development, and so we as players, as reviewers, as consumers, have a little bit more direct control over the types of games that get produced. And we exert that control through the ways that we show support for games, you know. When you go out and you buy this game, when you tell your friend, hey, you should totally buy this game, or even if you lend it to your friend, you know, if you get out there and you spread the word and you start conversations, you know, on message boards, on aggregating sites, people do take notice of that, you know. It might not necessarily mean that we get Rise of the Argonauts 2, but it does show that we as consumers are interested in these kinds of storytelling. So if you enjoy this game as much as I did, and I have a hard time seeing how anybody could really not enjoy this game, definitely go out there and try to make some noise about it, you know. Let developers know that you're interested in titles that place a strong emphasis on story, on narrative, on you know, creating an intricate world, you know, and vote with your wallets, vote with your voice, you know, get more games like this made. This is something that I'm personally have a strong interest in, and I hope that, you know, the work that I'm doing, even with Underplayed, helps contribute to the further support and development of these types of games. I think that you know, gaming as a whole, as an industry, It started to mature in a lot of ways over the past several years, but it's also going through a lot of changes, and no one really knows how it's going to end up. But it is exciting to be part of a time where we as consumers and players have direct control over reception of games and over what happens with the future of this medium that we enjoy so much. I think that games like this that really focus on the storytelling aspect make it a lot easier to argue for the games as art, argument. Now, I didn't necessarily have any intense moments of emotional connection. I was surprised when Argo was assassinated, and at the end there, when Jason was reunited with Alceme, I did actually tear up a little bit, but it didn't necessarily, teach me any new lessons about life. It didn't necessarily, connect me to the characters as deeply as I might be with some of the characters of Mass Effect, but it was certainly going in the right direction. It was an entertaining story, and these are memorable characters. These are ones that I will look back on fondly, and I would like to see more developers take notice of that. To understand that I can't speak for every gamer, because a lot of gamers are absolutely satisfied with just an interesting gameplay mechanic. But for me personally, in order for me to get really invested in a game and to tell people about it, I need to see, engaging stories and engaging characters that really pull me in, like the characters of Rise of Argonauts. Is there going to be an after credit scene? I'm not sure. I'm always a little bit unclear about where I should cut off these final in-review commentaries. I'm not quite sure when the credits are going to finish. But nothing's coming up. Okay, it's just starting over.